Brexit is coming, and if you want to know more, then you need to listen in. What does it mean for Ireland and the UK, and what does it mean for the US? I will speak to my expert who has advised US presidents on Ireland, and she has recently written a book on the US-Irish relationship.
Informed, non-inflamed. Politics.
Hi, everyone. John Daly here. Joining me today to talk about Brexit is Trina Vargo. Trina is the founder and president of the US-Ireland Alliance, a nonprofit organization dedicated to a contemporary relationship between US and Ireland. She has also created the George J. Mitchell Scholarship Program and also the Oscar Wilde Awards. She was Senator Ted Kennedy's foreign policy advisor during the 1990s and was heavily involved in the Northern Ireland peace process. She was the advisor on Irish issues for every Democratic presidential candidate, from Michael Dukakis to Barack Obama. She is also the author of a new book you have to get. It's called Shenanigans, the US-Ireland Alliance in Uncertain Times. You can find the book on Amazon. Trust me, you need to read it. There's a lot of good stuff in there. But we're going to be talking Brexit right now. Trina, welcome to the show.
It's great to be here. Thanks, John, for having me.
Well, it's great to have you. I've always wanted to be talking to you about this. So while Brexit, it's not really garnering a lot of attention in the U.S., I mean, it has some. That's going to change, though, by October 31st. That's the date in which the UK's new Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, says he will take the United Kingdom out of the European Union. There are many concerns about this, not the least of which is what this means for Northern Ireland and whether or not there is a backstop. If you can, for folks, explain exactly what this is.
Yeah, John, the situation with Brexit, it's fluid, and a lot can happen between now and October 31st. But to simplify, there's a 300-mile border between Northern Ireland and Ireland. And as Northern Ireland is part of the United Kingdom, if Brexit occurs, that becomes the only land border between the UK and the EU, because Ireland's a member of the EU. So with the achievement of the Northern Ireland Peace Agreement back in 1998, the physical border went away, and Northern Ireland's been peaceful, largely peaceful. I mean, most of the violence, the troubles has largely gone away, not entirely, but mostly. And a return of a hard border would just be awful for the economies of the UK and Ireland, and especially Northern Ireland. Some people fear a return of violence. Both Britain and the EU have promised there will be no hard border after Brexit, but no one has yet to come up with how exactly that would work. The backstop that you mentioned was agreed by the former UK Prime Minister Theresa May and the EU, and it's a guarantee that the border will remain open if a solution isn't found. But Boris Johnson, who, as you said, is the new Prime Minister, and the Brexiteers oppose the backstop because that would mean that there wouldn't be customs checks at the border, and that would mean that the UK sort of remains tied to EU trade rules. So it's like being in while being out of the EU at the same time. And Johnson's telling the EU that, he'd like a deal, but that the backstop has to go. And if he doesn't get his way, he'll leave with no deal, or a hard Brexit, as it's called. The EU and Ireland have, thus far, been adamant that the backstop must be kept.
So how do people in Northern Ireland feel about this?
Well, the majority of people in Northern Ireland voted to remain in the EU. They know the economic damage that would come from a hard border.
Okay, but the DUP, the majority party in Northern Ireland, they're kind of propping up Johnson's government, right?
Yeah, they are. Go figure. Many moderate unionists, including business leaders, oppose a hard border. The DUP, which is more strident, fears that if Northern Ireland is treated differently than the rest of the UK, that'll be a slippery slope toward a united Ireland. And they seem willing to allow the economic devastation of Northern Ireland to make sure there's no daylight on this matter. I'd point out it's kind of odd that they're so fixed on not having different rules, because they have demanded different rules for Northern Ireland when it comes to other issues. So when it comes to things like abortion and same-sex marriage, neither of those are permitted in Northern Ireland, while they are in the rest of the UK. So it's all very counterintuitive.
So it's kind of like really the whole thing. It's like they want their cake and eat it too.
Yes. What the DUP seems incapable of admitting is that those in the UK who want Brexit really don't care at all about Northern Ireland. It's like the DUP's love is unrequited. They've held the balance in terms of giving the Conservatives just enough votes to help keep them in power. So Johnson, at least for the moment, needs them. But the DUP has to fear that if and when he calls a new election, and if he retains power without needing the DUP, he could throw them under the bus by either agreeing to the backstop or, as seems more likely right now, by opting for a hard Brexit with no concern for what that would mean for the Northern Ireland economy.
Okay, so how are the ways this could play out?
There's a number of ways. The latest reports are that the Irish Prime Minister, Leo Varadkar, will seek an all-island customs situation for agriculture and food, because those are the industries that will be hardest hit by Brexit. And the talk is that the DUP is saying it would live with a backstop for a very limited period of time, like 3 years, in exchange for that. There are many possibilities, but a hard border with a customs check is a real possibility, and everyone simply has to prepare for that. It could backfire, though, on the DUP, because if Northern Ireland's economy goes down the toilet, which is a strong possibility, that will likely hasten the date for a vote on Northern Ireland uniting with Ireland.
Wow. So, as I understand it, in order for Northern Ireland to become a part of Ireland, the majority of people, North and South, must vote for that. Now, that's part of the Good Friday Agreement. Now, what has to happen to bring those votes to the fore?
Yeah, the Northern Ireland Act of 1998, which is when we achieved the Good Friday Agreement, it says that it leaves that with the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland to decide when to have a border poll. I should clarify that the language says that the Secretary shall, if at any time it appears likely to him that a majority of those voting would express a wish that Northern Ireland should cease to be part of the United Kingdom and form part of a united Ireland. So it's tricky because in the most recent Northern Ireland Assembly elections in 2017, the nationalist or the Catholic vote was not even 40%. So the chance they could get 50% is unlikely to happen tomorrow. And there's a lot of things to take into consideration, like that not every Catholic is a nationalist. And the number of people who now identify as quote unquote other, meaning they're not naming themselves as a nationalist or a unionist, that's shot up to at least 17%. And that 17% is key. But it's also the case that the majority of people in Northern Ireland, as I said, voted to remain in the EU. And moderate Protestants, particularly those in the business community, are not happy with the DUP's hard line. So if there's no violence, it might be possible that moderate unionists in a Northern Ireland with a terrible economy could actually vote for a united Ireland. I believe a hard border will actually hasten a border poll, but it won't happen overnight despite some Sinn Féin demands for an immediate vote.
Now, you said if there is no violence, is violence likely?
No one knows for sure, but I'm someone who does not believe there would be a widespread return to violence. The IRA disarmed some time ago. That said, one can never rule out dissidents targeting customs border patrol areas if those came to exist. But the vast majority of people in Northern Ireland have no interest in a return to violence. And violence doesn't even make sense for the dissidents. I mean, if their objective is a united Ireland, a hard border and an economic downturn could hasten a border poll. Adding violence to the equation would actually have the opposite effect of what they say they want.
We are talking with Trina Vargo with the U.S.-Ireland Alliance, and we're talking about Brexit. So, so the Irish, the Irish in regular Ireland, what do they fear?
Well, just as the DUP fears the UK will throw them under the bus when push comes to shove, Ireland fears that the EU might abandon them at the end of the day. Now, so far, they've been in lockstep with the EU backing Ireland's demand for a backstop. But if Johnson leaves on 31 October and with nothing in place, the EU will expect the Irish to have a customs regime in place on what would become the UK-EU border.
Okay. Now, both the EU and the UK, they're going to want trade deals with the US. And there seems to be some different views on that in terms of Republicans and Democrats in Congress. I've read that Richie Neal, the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, and Speaker Nancy Pelosi have both threatened the UK and even the EU that there won't be trade deals with the US if the Good Friday Agreement is jeopardized.
Yeah, the key word there is jeopardized. And what does that mean? See, the border isn't actually referred to in the Good Friday Agreement, and back when it was negotiated more than 20 years ago, nobody was thinking that the UK would leave the EU. Um, the Belfast Agreement is something that many of us in the U.S. were heavily involved in, and nobody wants to see that jeopardized. So I understand where Neil and Pelosi are coming from, but the key will be in how they define jeopardize, and I doubt it serves them to explicitly define that, what that means at this time, because there are so many unknowns. But, I mean, think about it, trade agreements in the best of circumstances take years to conclude. Remember, the Obama administration abandoned its own attempt at an EU-U.S. trade deal after something like, I think it was something like 6 years. The U.S. is obviously going to want trade deals with both the EU and the UK. In 2016, when President Obama waded into this and he visited London, he warned that if Brexit occurred, when it came to negotiating trade agreements, he said the UK would be behind the EU. Now, Trump has the authority to start working on trade agreements with both the EU and the UK, and given his relationship with Johnson, I don't really see him putting the UK to the back of the line. 45 Republican senators actually just signed a letter to Boris Johnson pledging that they'd back a trade deal with Britain, regardless of how he breaks up with Europe. But as you noted, both houses of Congress have to approve a trade deal, and if Nancy Pelosi blocks a vote on this, and that's that. I also know that, the power of business in the U.S., and you can bet that they don't want anything to interfere with trade. They want trade with both, because that means American jobs. And when any trade deal comes around, many of the players who are talking about this now may not even be in their current roles. So I think we should definitely use whatever influence we may have and try to be helpful. But I think we should be honest about the limits of that. It's far too soon to be able to tell. And nobody wants a return of a border. But if it comes, I'm optimistic about Ireland. There would be dislocations, especially in agriculture. But Ireland's also gaining jobs from companies leaving the city in London and moving to Dublin and other places. So I think the bottom line is Johnson has said, quote, in no circumstances would there be physical checks or infrastructure at the border. And, I hope he means that, and he should be held to it.
So, Trina, for a lot of my listeners, a lot of them, trying to be informed, not inflamed, do you have any quick advice on people who want to stay on top of this issue? Is there like The Guardian, The Economist, the BBC? Are there any sources that you would say that people should kind of keep their ear to over the next few months?
Yeah, as you said, it hasn't gotten a lot of attention in the U.S. press. I mean, I would read the Irish Times every day, The Guardian. BBC is always good on these things. I mean, the Irish Times is behind a paywall, but I think if you read it on the day, you can read the day's articles. And there's a lot there that I think it's important, as I know you agree in terms of checking the media, to sort of read both sides of it. So the London Times is also another good paper, and you'll get the different perspectives from both what's going on in the UK and how the Irish are feeling about it and reacting to things.
All right, beautiful. That's great. Now, if you have interest in the U.S.-Ireland relationship, I'd urge you to buy Trina's book. It is a great summer read and includes stories, some amusing, some depressing, and from someone who's played an important role in the relationship for the last 25 years. There's also a little bit of political intrigue there you may want to take a look at. The book is called Shenanigans, the U.S.-Ireland Relationship in Uncertain Times. You can find the book on Amazon. Again, we've been talking to Trina Vargo. Trina, thank you so much. Always great information. And of course, being an Irish American, I have great interest in everything that's going on there. And you were the person I turned to.
Well, I appreciate being on the show, and it's great to talk to you as always, John.
All right, Trina, thank you very much. And folks, remember to stay in touch with my Facebook and Twitter news sites so you can get a lot of information, whether it's on Ireland or on news. All you have to do is look for at John Daly News or Informed Not Inflamed. Take a look at that. We will catch you next time.
For more on John Daly, go to informednotinflamed.com.